With trembling hands clutching her final $97, Sierra Blackwood stood at the precipice of a new beginning, or perhaps a cruel joke. 3 months of living in her pickup truck with her loyal border collie, Max, had hollowed her cheeks and etched worry lines around her eyes, but couldn't extinguish the stubborn flicker of hope that had kept her going since the economic collapse of her small mountain town had eliminated her wilderness guide business, and medical bills from her father's cancer treatment had forced her into bankruptcy. The certified letter she held announcing her inheritance of her estranged grandfather's abandoned mining claim in the Montana wilderness seemed more like a cosmic punchline than salvation. The property was reportedly worthless, the mine depleted decades ago. The equipment rusted beyond repair, and worse still, her late husband's wealthy family, the Harringtons, were already contesting the will, claiming she was unfit to manage any estate after her financial collapse. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Rain pelted the windshield of Sierra's 12-year-old Ford pickup as she navigated the winding mountain roads toward Crystal Ridge Mine. The property had been in her mother's family for generations, though Sierra had never visited. Her mother had left Montana at 18, severing all ties with her father, Sierra's grandfather, Ezekiel Blackwood, refusing to ever explain what had caused their irreparable rift. "Are we really going to live in a mine, Mom?" asked her 10-year-old daughter Luna, her voice small but tinged with adventure. From the back seat, she clutched her weathered journal where she meticulously documented gems and minerals, the one constant passion in a life that had become increasingly unstable since her father's sudden death in a climbing accident 3 years ago. Max, their border collie, rested his head on Luna's lap, his warm presence a comfort in their uncertain journey. "I'm not sure yet, sweetheart," Sierra answered. "We're just checking it out first. The lawyer said it needs a lot of work." That was an understatement. According to Meredith Chang, the straightforward attorney who had tracked Sierra down at the campground where she'd been sleeping in her truck between sparse guiding jobs. "Your grandfather Ezekiel was eccentric," Chang had explained delicately. "The mining claim has been abandoned for decades. Most locals consider it worthless, but Ezekiel was adamant that it go to you specifically, despite never having met you." What Chang had failed to mention was the fierce opposition from the Harrington family. William Harrington had been the cherished heir to one of Denver's oldest jewelry empires until he'd fallen in love with Sierra, a wilderness guide with nothing to her name but student loan debt and dreams of sharing the mountain's majesty with others. The Harringtons had disowned him, only to reappear like vultures when a tragic climbing accident claimed him at 38, leaving Sierra and Luna with nothing but crushing medical bills and funeral expenses. Now they were contesting Ezekiel's will, claiming Sierra was an unfit guardian who shouldn't be entrusted with any property, no matter how worthless. Their real motivation, Sierra suspected, was simple spite, a continuation of their campaign to erase any connection between the prestigious Harrington name and the woman they considered beneath their son's station. The dilapidated wooden sign at the property entrance was barely visible through the downpour. Crystal Ridge Mine. Est, 1883. The access road was little more than a muddy track winding up a steep hillside to what appeared to be an abandoned industrial site. A small caretaker's cabin stood to one side, its windows dark, its roof sagging precariously on the eastern edge. "It looks like something from a fantasy movie," Luna whispered, though her eyes shone with fascination rather than fear as they sat in the idling truck, gathering courage to make a dash through the rain. Max's ears perked up, his attention focused on the cabin ahead. "It's just old and forgotten," Sierra replied, trying to inject optimism. "Like those archaeological sites you love reading about, waiting for someone to uncover its secrets." Luna brightened at this perspective. "Do you think we might find gems or cool mineral specimens?" Grandpa was a miner, right? Maybe. Sierra smiled, grateful for her daughter's ability to find wonder even in their desperate circumstances. Let's go see what we've got. She grabbed the threadbare raincoat from the back seat, one coat between the three of them. I'll make a run for it first and see if I can get the door open, then come back for you too. But before Sierra could exit the truck, Max began barking excitedly, his eyes fixed on something moving near the cabin. Through the curtain of rain, Sierra could make out a figure approaching, a tall woman in a heavy raincoat, waving at them. They watched cautiously as the stranger reached their truck. Sierra rolled down her window just a crack. "You must be Sierra Blackwood," the woman said, rain dripping from her weather-beaten hat. "I'm Charlotte Wilson. I've been keeping an eye on the place since Ezekiel passed. Come on, I've got the cabin warmed up for you." Sierra hesitated, years of hardship having taught her to be wary of unexpected kindness. "Ezekiel asked me to watch for you," Charlotte explained, seeming to sense her hesitation. "Said you'd come eventually, though he was never sure when. I've kept the place from completely falling apart, but it needs work." With little choice and the storm intensifying, Sierra nodded. "Thank you. Let me get my daughter and dog." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The cabin interior was like stepping into a time capsule. Simple, sturdy furniture from another era filled the small living room. Bookshelves lined the walls, packed with volumes whose titles Sierra couldn't make out through the dust. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and above it hung a portrait of a stern-faced man with piercing blue eyes that seemed to follow their movements. "Is that him? Great-Grandpa Ezekiel?" Luna asked, her voice hushed as if they were in a museum. "I think so," Sierra answered, studying the face for any resemblance to her mother or herself. There was something in the set of the jaw, perhaps, that reminded her of her own determination. Charlotte moved efficiently around the cabin, stoking the fire and pulling sheets off furniture. "Ezekiel said you'd come when you needed it most," she said matter-of-factly. "Seems he was right. You knew him well?" Sierra asked, helping Luna out of her wet jacket. 30 years, Charlotte nodded. "I own the neighboring property. Been the local geologist around these parts long enough to have worked with just about every claim holder in the county." She paused, watching Max as he sniffed around the room, his tail wagging. "That dog's got good instincts. Ezekiel would have liked him." As darkness fell, the storm intensified. Charlotte helped them settle in, showing Sierra where supplies were kept and explaining the cabin's quirks, the temperamental water heater, the generator's tricks, the roof that leaked in the far corner when the wind came from the north. "There's food in the pantry," Charlotte said. "Nothing fancy, but it'll get you through a few days until you can make it to town." She headed toward the door, but turned back with a penetrating look. "The Harringtons sent someone around last week. Slick fellow in an expensive SUV asking questions about the property. I told him nothing worth knowing, but they're aware you're coming." Sierra tensed. What do they want with this place? It's supposedly worthless. Charlotte's expression revealed nothing. Ezekiel had his theories. You might find his journals interesting. He kept them in the desk drawer. With that cryptic remark, she departed, leaving Sierra and Luna alone in their inherited shelter. Luna, exhausted from the journey and overwhelmed by their new circumstances, fell asleep wrapped in a faded quilt Sierra had found in a cedar chest. Max curled protectively at her feet, though his ears remained alert, adjusting to the new sounds of the mountain cabin. Alone with her thoughts, Sierra wandered through the small cabin, trying to assess what she'd gotten them into. The place was in disrepair, but not beyond saving. The bones seemed solid, though everything needed updating. In the corner of the living room stood a massive roll-top desk, its surface covered with papers, ledgers, and dusty file folders. Sierra approached it hesitantly, feeling like an intruder despite being the legal owner of everything around her. This was where she would need to start sorting through paperwork to determine what needed to be kept and what could be discarded. As she began organizing the scattered documents, Sierra found mostly what she expected: utility bills, property tax statements, equipment maintenance records. But buried beneath the mundane paperwork, she discovered a leather-bound journal wedged beneath a stack of geological surveys. The binding was worn, its pages yellowed with age. Opening it, Sierra recognized handwriting similar to that on the deed Chang had shown her, bearing Ezekiel's distinctive script. The journal entries dated back decades, chronicling not just the mine's operations, but occasionally veering into cryptic territory. Sierra flipped through the pages, searching for any mention of her mother or clues about why the family had fractured. Instead, she found a disturbing entry from 1994. "They're watching the property. They know I haven't revealed what lies within the Eastern Cavern. The Harringtons have always suspected the truth." The Harringtons. Sierra's pulse quickened. Her late husband's family. What possible connection could they have to her grandfather's mining claim decades before she'd even met William? She turned more pages, finding increasingly mysterious entries about survey lines being deliberately misdrawn and the old geological analysis showing what truly lies beneath Crystal Ridge's weathered face. One page contained nothing but a sequence of numbers and letters that resembled coordinates, followed by the cryptic note, "The mother lode lies where the 3 quartz pillars meet in the forgotten shaft." As she closed the journal, her elbow knocked a small metal object from the desk. Bending to retrieve what looked like an antique miner's compass, Sierra noticed something odd about the floorboard where it had fallen. One plank seemed slightly different from the others, the grain pattern inconsistent, the edges more precisely cut. Heart suddenly racing for reasons she couldn't articulate, Sierra pressed her fingers against the board and felt a slight give. She applied more pressure to one end, and to her astonishment, it pivoted upward, revealing a small hollow space beneath the floor. Inside was a brass key unlike any modern one she'd seen, large, with an intricate pattern on its bow and a complex bit at the end, the kind of key that would open something old and significant. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows as thunder rumbled in the distance. Lightning briefly illuminated the room, casting strange shadows across the walls. Luna stirred in her sleep but didn't wake. Max, however, raised his head, his eyes fixed on Sierra and the key in her hand. Sierra held the key up to the dim light, running her thumb over the ornate engravings. What did it open? And what did it have to do with the Harrington family, who were at that very moment trying to take this inheritance from her? She returned to the desk, searching more thoroughly. In a drawer beneath stacks of old correspondence, she found a small metal box locked with a simple latch. The brass key didn't fit this lock, but a letter opener from the desk drawer worked as an improvised tool. Inside was a yellowed map of the mining claim, much larger than she'd been led to believe, with several areas marked with strange symbols. One location was circled repeatedly, a spot deep within the eastern face labeled only with the initials GSC. Beneath the map was a black and white photograph of 3 men standing before what appeared to be a mine shaft entrance. One was clearly a younger Ezekiel, his stern expression already forming. Beside him stood a man who bore a striking resemblance to William's father, a Harrington ancestor perhaps. The third man Sierra didn't recognize, but all 3 held specialized equipment and wore expressions that suggested their discovery was significant. Scrawled on the back of the photograph in Ezekiel's distinctive handwriting, "Main test shaft, 1972, discovery confirmed. GSC worth millions if claims properly filed." Sierra's breath caught. GSC gemstone cache? Was it possible? Had her grandfather discovered something valuable beneath the supposedly worthless mining claim? And did the Harringtons somehow know about it? A sudden scratching at the door made her jump, her heart pounding. Max was on his feet instantly, not barking but alert, his head tilted curiously. The scratching came again, more insistent. Carefully returning the items to their hiding place and ensuring the loose floorboard was back in position, Sierra approached the door cautiously. Through the rain-streaked window, she could make out nothing but darkness. The scratching continued. "Who's there?" she called, reaching for the heavy flashlight she'd noticed on the shelf by the door. No answer came but the howling wind and persistent scratching. Max wasn't acting aggressive, a good sign, given his protective nature. With the flashlight gripped tightly, Sierra opened the door a crack. A bedraggled mountain lion cub, hardly bigger than a house cat, huddled on the porch, soaked and shivering. Sierra gasped, instinctively looking around for the mother. A cub this small shouldn't be alone. Max pushed forward, not aggressively, but with clear interest. To Sierra's astonishment, he gently nosed the cub, who responded with a pathetic mew but no fear. "Oh, little one," Sierra whispered, her heart melting. "Where's your mama?" The answer came in the form of Charlotte's voice from the darkness. "Dead, I'm afraid," she said, appearing suddenly at the porch steps, rain dripping from her jacket. "Poachers, last week. I've been trying to catch this little one since, but he's been elusive. Seems he's chosen you." Sierra glanced back at Luna, still sleeping peacefully. "We can't keep a mountain lion, just for tonight," Charlotte urged. "I'll take him to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center in the morning. But in this storm..." She left the sentence hanging. With a sigh, Sierra stepped back, allowing the cub to scramble inside, followed by a surprisingly dry Charlotte. "You weren't really just passing by, were you?" Sierra asked, suddenly suspicious. Charlotte's weathered face cracked into a smile. "Ezekiel always said you'd be sharp." "No, I've been watching the cabin since the Harrington man came snooping. Thought you might need a friendly face when you arrived." She knelt to examine the cub. "I didn't expect this little complication, though." As Charlotte tended to the cub, creating a makeshift bed from an old towel near the fire, Sierra processed this information. "You know why the Harringtons are interested in this property, don't you?" Charlotte's hands stilled momentarily. "I have theories." Ezekiel had certainties, but he kept his cards close. She looked up at Sierra. "Did you find his journal yet?" Sierra hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal to this stranger, friendly though she seemed. "Some of it. Enough to know there's more to this inheritance than a worthless mining claim." "Smart," Charlotte nodded approvingly. "Don't trust too quickly. Ezekiel wouldn't have. But know this, whatever you found, whatever he left for you, the Harringtons want it badly. And they don't play fair." After Charlotte left, promising to return in the morning for the cub, Sierra found sleep impossible. She sat beside Luna, watching her daughter's peaceful face in the dying firelight, while her mind raced with questions. Why had her mother never mentioned any of this? What had caused the rift between her and Ezekiel? And most pressingly, was there really something valuable hidden in the mine? Something worth millions, as the photograph suggested. The mountain lion cub had fallen asleep curled against Max, the unlikely pair finding comfort in each other's warmth. Sierra couldn't help but see it as a sign nature itself seemed to be aligning to help them in this strange new chapter of their lives. Dawn arrived with weak sunlight filtering through the grime-covered windows. The storm had passed, leaving a soggy landscape and a clear sky. Sierra had dozed off sometime in the early hours, waking with a start as Luna shook her gently. "Mom, there's a baby mountain lion sleeping with Max," she whispered, her eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. Sierra quickly explained the situation, watching relief wash over her daughter's face when she learned they would be helping the cub find proper care. Luna had always loved animals, a trait she'd inherited from her father. "And Mom," Luna continued, her voice dropping, "someone's outside." Sierra sprang to her feet, peering through the front window. A sleek black Range Rover was parked in the muddy driveway, and a tall man in expensive outdoor jacket was making his way toward the porch, picking his way carefully around puddles. "Stay inside," Sierra instructed Luna, straightening her rumpled clothes before opening the door just as the man was about to knock. "Mrs. Harrington," the man offered a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "James Harrington, William's brother. I don't believe we've had the pleasure." "It's Miss Blackwood now," she corrected him. "I've gone back to my maiden name." If the correction bothered him, he didn't show it. "What brings you here, Mr. Harrington?" Sierra asked, making no move to invite him inside. "Concern, primarily," he replied smoothly. "This property is in terrible condition, hardly suitable for a child." His eyes moved past her to where Luna stood in the doorway with Max protectively at her side, the mountain lion cub mercifully hidden from view behind the sofa. "Our family was quite surprised to learn of Ezekiel Blackwood's bequest to you. There must have been some confusion on the old man's part." "There was no confusion," Sierra countered. "Miss Chang explained that my grandfather was very specific about his wishes." James's smile tightened. "Yes, well, China's nearly as ancient as Ezekiel was. Regardless, I've come with a proposition that might benefit everyone. The Harrington Foundation is prepared to offer you $150,000 for the property, far more than it's worth in its current state. You could make a fresh start somewhere more appropriate for a young mother and child." The amount was tempting enough to secure an apartment and give them stability for a few months while Sierra found work. But after what she had discovered last night, $150,000 seemed suspiciously low if there was indeed something valuable on the property. "That's very generous," Sierra said carefully, "but I'm not ready to make any decisions yet. We've only just arrived." Something hardened in James's expression. "I understand, but I should warn you, this type of isolated property can be dangerous. Abandoned mines, old equipment, structural collapses. It would be tragic if anything happened while you were evaluating your options." The thinly veiled threat hung in the air between them. Sierra felt a surge of protective anger. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Harrington. I'll be sure to have the property thoroughly inspected. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a busy day ahead." As James returned to his vehicle, Sierra noticed Charlotte watching from the edge of the property, her stance suggesting she'd been prepared to intervene if necessary. The geologist nodded to Sierra once before disappearing back toward what must be her neighboring cabin. "Mom, who was that man?" Luna asked once they were alone. "Someone who knew your dad's family," Sierra answered, not wanting to frighten her daughter with the full truth. "He wanted to buy the mining claim from us." "Are we going to sell it?" Luna's voice held a note of disappointment. Despite its condition, the cabin represented stability after months of uncertainty. "Not yet," Sierra decided. "First, I think we need to explore what great-grandpa Ezekiel left for us. There might be more here than meets the eye." Over a simple breakfast of canned beans and stale crackers, the limit of Ezekiel's pantry, Sierra formulated a plan. She needed to understand what GSC meant beyond her guess about gemstones, and why the wealthy Harringtons were so interested in the supposedly worthless property. Most importantly, she needed to find what the brass key opened. "Can we explore outside?" Luna asked, her initial fascination with the mining claim growing stronger in daylight. Max sat alertly by the door, the mountain lion cub now awake and cautiously exploring its temporary shelter. "Yes, but stay where I can see you," Sierra cautioned. "Some areas might not be safe." The mining claim spread out before them as they stepped onto the porch. Once productive excavation sites, now reclaimed by nature, stretched toward distant hills. Several dilapidated structures stood in various states of disrepair: an equipment shed, an office building, and what appeared to be an entrance to a tunnel system carved into the mountainside. Was great-grandpa Ezekiel a miner? Luna asked as they made their way toward the largest structure. "I think so once," Sierra replied. "But he must have stopped active mining a long time ago." The equipment shed's door protested with a screech of rusted hinges as Sierra pulled it open. Inside, shafts of sunlight cut through gaps in the roof, illuminating dancing dust motes. Mining equipment sat abandoned, a small excavator, various tools whose purposes Sierra couldn't identify, hard hats and safety gear hanging from pegs on the wall. While Luna cautiously explored the safer areas of the shed, Sierra consulted the property map she'd brought from the cabin, looking for the area marked GSC. "Luna, stay inside for a minute. I'm going to check something out by the main tunnel," Sierra called, receiving a distracted acknowledgement as her daughter examined a shelf of mineral specimens. The main tunnel entrance was partially collapsed, but still accessible. Sierra picked her way through the debris, comparing landmarks to the map. After about 50 yards inside, using her phone's flashlight, she spotted them, 3 massive quartz pillars arranged in a rough triangle, just as the cryptic note had indicated. They seemed deliberately preserved, too uniform to be a natural formation. As she approached, Sierra noticed something odd about the rock face between the pillars. While the surrounding walls were rough-hewn, this section appeared smoother, more deliberately finished. At the center, nearly hidden by fallen debris, was what appeared to be a metal door set into the rock face. Heart-pounding, Sierra knelt beside it, clearing away decades of accumulated rubble. The door was made of steel, approximately 3 feet square, with a sophisticated lock mechanism that appeared remarkably well-maintained compared to everything else on the property. In the center of the lock was a keyhole that looked like it would accommodate the brass key she'd found. A sudden barking from the tunnel entrance startled her. Max came bounding toward her, followed by Luna. "Mom! I found something cool," Luna called, her voice echoing off the tunnel walls. "I thought I told you to stay in the shed," Sierra said, more worried than angry. "Max started barking and pulling me toward the cabin," Luna explained. "There's a lady there with a truck for the mountain lion cub, and look what Max found buried by the porch steps." Luna held out a small wooden box, its surface weathered but intact. The lid was carved with an intricate geometric pattern that matched the engravings on the brass key. Sierra glanced back at the metal door, torn between investigating it and examining Luna's discovery. "Let's head back to the cabin," she decided. "We should check on the cub, and we can look at this box together." At the cabin, they found Charlotte loading the mountain lion cub into a specially designed transport cage in the back of her truck. "He'll be fine," Charlotte assured Luna, who was clearly concerned. "The rehabilitation center specializes in orphan predators. If all goes well, he'll be released back into the wild when he's ready." As the truck disappeared down the muddy access road, Sierra turned her attention to the wooden box. It had no obvious lock, but the pattern carved into its surface suggested it might be a puzzle box. She traced the geometric design with her finger, noticing how certain lines seemed to align with grooves in the wood. "May I try?" Luna asked eagerly. Sierra handed her the box, watching as her daughter's nimble fingers explored its surface. Luna had always had a gift for puzzles, inheriting her father's patience and methodical approach to problems. "I think this part moves," Luna said, pressing gently on one section of the pattern. With a soft click, a panel slid aside, revealing a small compartment containing a folded piece of paper and what looked like a fragment of crystal. Sierra carefully unfolded the brittle paper. It contained a hand-drawn map of what appeared to be an underground tunnel system, far more extensive than the visible mine entrance suggested. One chamber was marked with the same GSC initials she'd seen in Ezekiel's journal, with a note in the margin, "Primary chamber secured. Secondary access through eastern waterfall." Luna was more interested in the crystal fragment. "Mom, look!" she gasped, holding it up to the light streaming through the window. "It's a sapphire. A real one." Sierra took the gem from her daughter, examining it with growing amazement. The stone was rough, uncut, but even in its natural state, its deep blue color was unmistakable. And it was huge, easily the size of her thumbnail. Where would Grandpa Ezekiel get something like this? Luna wondered. I think, Sierra said slowly, piecing together the clues from the journal, the map, and now this discovery, he might have found it right here on this property. The implications were staggering. If Ezekiel had discovered a significant gemstone deposit on the mining claim, not just ordinary gems, but specimens of this quality and size, it could indeed be worth millions. No wonder the Harringtons were so interested in acquiring the property. Their exploration was interrupted by Max's sudden alert, barking from the front porch. Sierra hastily tucked the sapphire and map into her pocket and moved to the window. 2 black SUVs were making their way up the muddy access road. Luna, grab your backpack, Sierra instructed, keeping her voice calm despite the surge of adrenaline. Put in some water bottles and snacks from the pantry. We're going on a little adventure. While Luna packed, Sierra quickly gathered Ezekiel's journal, the property maps, and the brass key. She scribbled a hasty note to Charlotte explaining they'd gone hiking to explore the property, in case the geologist returned while they were gone. By the time the SUVs pulled up in front of the cabin, Sierra, Luna, and Max were already slipping into the forest behind the structure. Following a barely visible trail that Sierra had spotted on Ezekiel's Map 1 that apparently led toward the eastern waterfall mentioned in his notes. Through the trees, Sierra could see James Harrington emerge from the first vehicle, accompanied by 2 men whose outdoor attire couldn't disguise their intimidating physiques. From the second SUV stepped an elderly woman, elegantly dressed despite the rugged setting and moving with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. Eleanor Harrington, Sierra whispered, recognizing William's grandmother, the family matriarch who had never acknowledged Luna even after William's death. Who are they, Mom? Luna asked, sensing Sierra's tension. People we need to be careful around, Sierra answered truthfully. Stay quiet and follow me. Max will help us if we get lost. They watched from the forest edge as the Harringtons and their associates entered the cabin without so much as a knock. The casual violation of their space sent a surge of anger through Sierra. But she forced herself to focus on their immediate goal, finding the eastern waterfall and the secondary access to whatever GSC represented. The forest trail was overgrown but still discernible. Max took the lead, his border collie instincts making him an excellent pathfinder. The terrain grew increasingly steep as they climbed higher into the mountains, following the sound of rushing water that grew louder with each step. After about an hour of difficult hiking, they emerged at the base of a spectacular waterfall, cascading down a sheer rock face. The water crashed into a clear pool before continuing downstream as a fast-flowing creek. It's beautiful, Luna breathed, momentarily forgetting their urgent flight from the Harringtons. Sierra consulted Ezekiel's map. According to his notes, there should be an access point near the waterfall, a secondary entrance to the tunnel system that led to the GSC. Look for anything unusual, Sierra instructed Luna. A door, an opening in the rocks, anything that doesn't seem natural. They split up, searching the area around the waterfall's base. Max, however, seemed more interested in the waterfall itself. He paced back and forth at the edge of the pool, whining and looking expectantly at Sierra. What is it, boy? She asked, approaching the pool's edge. Max barked once, then plunged into the water, swimming directly toward the waterfall. To Sierra's astonishment, he disappeared behind the curtain of water. Mom! Max went behind the falls. Luna cried, rushing to the water's edge. Stay there! Sierra warned, but it was too late. Luna had already kicked off her shoes and was wading into the pool. With no choice but to follow, Sierra quickly removed her own boots and joined her daughter. The water was shockingly cold, but the pool was shallow enough to wade through. Together, they approached the thundering waterfall. "There might be a cave behind it," Sierra shouted over the roar of falling water. "Stay close to me." Taking Luna's hand, she led them cautiously toward the cascading wall. The spray was disorienting, but as they drew closer, Sierra could make out a darker shadow behind the water and opening. With a deep breath, they pushed through the waterfall, gasping as the cold water poured over them. On the other side, they found themselves in a small cave where Max waited, shaking himself dry and wagging his tail triumphantly. "You clever dog," Sierra praised, hugging the border collie despite his wet fur. The cave extended back into darkness, but near the entrance, hidden from outside view by a natural rock formation, was an unmistakably man-made feature, a heavy wooden door reinforced with iron bands. In the center of the door was a keyhole that matched the brass key Sierra carried. "This is it," she whispered, excitement and apprehension mingling as she inserted the key. It turned with surprising ease, and the door swung open to reveal a tunnel leading into the mountain. The tunnel was remarkably well preserved, with timber supports, and even the remains of an old rail system for mining carts. Sierra's phone flashlight revealed that the passage sloped gently downward, apparently connecting with the larger mine system. "Should we go in?" Luna asked, her voice a mix of excitement and nervousness. Sierra hesitated. They were soaking wet, had limited light, and no one knew exactly where they were. The sensible thing would be to return to the cabin, deal with the Harringtons directly, and bring Charlotte or other witnesses before exploring further. But instinct told her they might not get another chance. If the Harringtons found this entrance, or the metal door by the quartz pillars, they might secure or destroy whatever evidence lay within before Sierra could prove her claim. "Just a little way," she decided. "We'll mark our path so we can find our way back." Using Luna's colored pens from her backpack, they marked arrows on the tunnel walls at regular intervals as they proceeded deeper into the mountain. Max trotted ahead confidently, seemingly unconcerned about the underground passage. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably less than 30 minutes, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Sierra's flashlight beam couldn't penetrate the full extent of the space, but what it did reveal took her breath away. The walls glittered in the light, veins of crystal-embedded rock catching and reflecting the beam. Small-scale mining equipment stood ready for use, drills, picks, even a collection table for sorting materials. In the center of the chamber stood a wooden desk bearing more recent equipment, digital measuring tools, modern testing kits, and a laptop computer that appeared only a few years old. Ezekiel had been actively working this site until recently, far more recently than anyone knew. "Mom, look!" Luna gasped, her own small flashlight aimed at a section of wall where crystals of various colors protruded from the rock face. "They're gemstones. Sapphires and... I think those are rubies." Sierra approached the wall, stunned by the density and quality of the crystal formations. Her limited knowledge of gemstones was enough to recognize that this was extraordinary, not just a few scattered specimens, but a major deposit of precious stones. On the desk was a leather-bound ledger, different from the journal Sierra had found in the cabin. Inside were meticulous records of gemstones extracted, processed, and sold through various anonymous channels. According to Ezekiel's calculations, he had extracted over $2.8 million worth of gems in the last decade alone, a fortune he had apparently secreted away somewhere. But more significant was a folder labeled Evidence. Inside, Sierra found the original survey documents from the 1970s, alongside modern GPS coordinates and geological mappings. Ezekiel had been building a case documenting how the Harringtons had fraudulently altered property boundaries to claim the gemstone rights. According to his notes, the main deposit, worth an estimated $230 million at current market rates, lay directly beneath Crystal Ridge Mine, with only a small portion extending onto Harrington land. Most damning of all was a deathbed confession from a former county surveyor. notarized and dated just 3 years ago. Admitting to altering records at Vincent Harrington's behest in exchange for a significant bribe. "This is what they're afraid of," Sierra whispered. Ezekiel had gathered enough evidence to not only reclaim the gemstone rights, but potentially sue the Harrington family for decades of illegal mining and fraudulent appropriation. As she continued exploring the chamber, Sierra discovered a small safe embedded in the rock wall. Beside it, scratched into the stone, "For Margaret's daughter when she is ready." Below was a 6-digit number, her birthday. With trembling fingers, Sierra entered the date. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing stacks of cash, documents, and several thick envelopes. One envelope contained bearer bonds worth over $1.5 million. Another held a letter addressed to Sierra specifically, dated just months before Ezekiel's death. "My dear granddaughter, if you're reading this, I have passed on without meeting you, my deepest regret. Your mother left to protect you from the Harrington family's influence and threats. They've destroyed many lives in their pursuit of wealth, and Margaret feared you would become another casualty in a war that began before your birth. Everything you find here is yours by right, not just as my heir, but as the rightful owner of the gemstone deposit that sustained our family secretly for generations. The documents in the chamber provide legal proof of the Harringtons' fraud. The attorney, Meredith Chang, knows how to proceed when you're ready. Be cautious. The Harringtons won't surrender their ill-gotten empire without a fight. But know this, you come from a line of survivors and fighters. In your veins runs the blood of those who never surrendered to intimidation or injustice. Your inheritance isn't just gemstones, but the strength to reclaim what was stolen from us. With love and faith in you, Ezekiel Blackwood." Tears streamed down Sierra's face as she read her grandfather's words. All these years, he'd been preparing not just a financial legacy, but the means to restore justice to a family wronged decades in the making. "Mom?" Luna's voice pulled her back to the present. "I found something weird." Sierra wiped her eyes and followed her daughter to a corner of the chamber where Max was pawing excitedly at what appeared to be a solid rock wall. Luna's flashlight illuminated a tiny crevice, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. "Max smells something," Luna explained. "He keeps trying to dig here." Sierra examined the crevice more carefully. There was airflow coming through it. The wall wasn't solid at all. "Stand back," she instructed, picking up a small mining pick from the nearby equipment. Carefully, she worked at the crevice, widening it enough to reveal that it was indeed a narrow passage. As debris fell away, Max became increasingly excited, barking and pawing at the opening. With a final strike, a large section of loose rock collapsed inward, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. The air that rushed out was cool and smelled of earth and something else, something sweet and organic. Sierra directed her flashlight into the space, and the beam reflected back from thousands of points of light, creating a dazzling, disorienting effect. As her eyes adjusted, she realized what she was seeing, the largest concentration of raw gemstones she had ever imagined possible. The walls of the small chamber were literally encrusted with them sapphires, rubies, emeralds, and others she couldn't immediately identify, all protruding from the living rock in clusters and veins. "It's beautiful," Luna whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "This must be what Ezekiel called the mother lode," Sierra said, her voice hushed with awe. "This is GSC, the gemstone cache." Max, however, was interested in something else entirely. He had pushed his way into the chamber and was now digging frantically at a pile of debris in one corner. "Max, stop!" Sierra called, worried about the stability of the chamber. But the border collie ignored her, continuing to dig until he unearthed something that made Sierra's heart skip a beat. A human bone. "This is extraordinary," the attorney said, holding up the notarized confession. "This alone would be enough to challenge the Harringtons' claim to the gemstone rights. Combined with the original survey documents and Ezekiel's meticulous records, She shook her head in wonder. Sierra, do you understand what you found? This isn't just about a hidden cache of gemstones. This is evidence of one of the largest land fraud schemes in state history. And potentially worse, Sierra added, describing the skeletal remains they'd discovered. Chang's expression grew grave. That changes everything. We need to go to the sheriff immediately. The Harringtons have people watching the roads, Charlotte warned. They'll know the minute Sierra leaves this property. Let them, Chang said with unexpected fierceness. I've made copies of all these documents and sent them to 3 different secure locations. If anything happens to any of us, they'll be released to the State Attorney General, the FBI, and the media. The Harringtons are powerful, but they're not above the law. Sierra felt a surge of hope at Chang's confidence. When do we leave? As soon as Luna wakes up, Chang decided. My car is at the end of your access road, Charlotte. We'll take the most public route to town, in broad daylight, where witnesses can see us. Luna, who had been listening quietly from the doorway, spoke up. I'm already awake, and I want to help catch the bad guys who are trying to steal our mine. Sierra smiled at her daughter's courage. Then let's get ready. Max will stay here with Charlotte. He'll be safer. Max whined at this, clearly unhappy with the arrangement. He should come with us, Luna insisted. He found the hidden chamber. He's part of this. Sierra hesitated, but Charlotte nodded. The dog's earned his place in this story. Besides, a border collie with sharp teeth might come in handy. The plan was simple. Charlotte would drive ahead as a scout, ensuring the road was clear. Sierra, Luna, Max, and Chang would follow in the attorney's car, taking the main highway to the county sheriff's office in Granite Springs, the nearest town of any size. As they prepared to leave, Sierra found herself drawn to Charlotte's living room window, gazing back toward Crystal Ridge Mine in the distance. Somewhere on that mountain lay a fortune in gemstones that had been rightfully hers all along, hidden by a grandfather she'd never met, but who had somehow known she would need it someday. He believed in you, Charlotte said, joining her at the window. Ezekiel used to say that the strongest metal is forged in the hottest fires. He watched from afar as you struggled, raised Luna alone, kept going when most would have given up. He knew you had the strength for this. Sierra blinked back unexpected tears. I wish I'd known him. In many ways you do, Charlotte replied. Every choice he made in that mine, every record he kept, every gem he hid away, it was all for you and Luna. His legacy isn't just wealth. It's the courage to stand up for what's rightfully yours. The journey to town began uneventfully. Charlotte's truck led the way down the mountain road, while Sierra, Luna, and Max followed with Chang in her sensible sedan. The morning was clear, the forest peaceful, offering no hint of the confrontation that awaited them. They were halfway to town when Charlotte's brake lights flashed. Ahead, 2 black SUVs blocked the narrow road, positioned diagonally to prevent passage. It's them, Sierra breathed, recognizing James Harrington stepping out of the lead vehicle. Chang slowed but didn't stop. Keep your head down, she instructed. I'm going to try to get around them. But as they approached, more men emerged from the SUVs, spreading across the road in an unmistakable barricade. Charlotte had stopped her truck and appeared to be arguing with James. We can't risk trying to crash through, Chang decided, bringing the car to a stop several yards back. There are too many of them, and they could hurt Luna. What do we do? Sierra asked, fear and determination warring within her. Chang reached into her glove compartment and removed a small digital recorder. We document everything. If they threaten us, we have it on record. And remember, copies of all the documents are already secured. They can stop us today, but they can't bury the truth. She stepped out of the car with confident authority, her small frame somehow imposing as she approached the standoff. Sierra followed, instructing Luna to stay in the car with Max. "Mr. Harrington," Chang called, her voice carrying across the tense silence. "You're illegally blocking a public road. I suggest you move your vehicles before I call the state police." James turned, his practiced smile nowhere in evidence. "Miss Chang, a pleasure as always. We're simply having a conversation with Miss Wilson here. No laws being broken." "Tell that to your armed associates," Chang replied, nodding toward the men flanking the SUVs, their jackets not quite concealing shoulder holsters. Sierra moved to Charlotte's side, keenly aware of how vulnerable they were on this isolated mountain road. "We're on our way to the sheriff's office," she stated clearly, knowing Chang's recorder was capturing everything. "We have evidence of survey fraud involving Crystal Ridge Mine, along with human remains discovered on the property." James's expression hardened. Absurd claims from a desperate woman trying to inflate the value of worthless property. "My family is simply trying to resolve this matter fairly and prevent you from embarrassing yourself with unfounded accusations. The survey documents and notarized confession we possess suggest otherwise," Chang countered. "As does the skeleton we discovered in a hidden chamber of the mine, a skeleton wearing identification belonging to Vincent Harrington." The effect of her words was immediate. James paled visibly, while his men exchanged uncomfortable glances. "You're bluffing," he managed, but the confidence had drained from his voice. "Am I?" Chang asked coolly. "Then you won't mind if we continue to the sheriff's office to present our evidence. After all, if we're bluffing, you have nothing to worry about." A tense silence fell over the standoff, broken by the unexpected sound of approaching vehicles. From around the bend came two sheriff's department SUVs, lights flashing. "I took the liberty of calling ahead," Chang explained with satisfaction. "Sheriff Davis was quite interested in meeting us, especially after I mentioned possible human remains and armed men blocking public roads." James's composure crumbled. "This isn't over," he hissed before signaling to his men. They quickly returned to their vehicles, which reversed and disappeared down a Forest Service road before the sheriff's deputies could reach the scene. Sheriff Davis, a stern-faced woman with salt and pepper hair and eyes that missed nothing, listened to their story with growing concern. "I've had my suspicions about the Harringtons for years," she admitted as they continued toward town in a convoy. "But they've always been careful to maintain a veneer of legitimacy. This evidence could change everything." At the sheriff's office, Sierra and Chang laid out the documents while Luna sat nearby, sketching the hidden chamber and its treasures in remarkable detail for one of the deputies. Davis studied the evidence methodically. "The fraud case is solid," she concluded. "As for the remains, we'll need to recover them properly with a forensic team. If it is Vincent Harrington, this case just escalated significantly." "What happens now?" Sierra asked, exhaustion and uncertainty creeping into her voice despite their victory in the roadside confrontation. "Now," Davis said firmly, "we execute a search warrant for the mine to document and secure the site. The state police will assist, given the Harringtons' influence. LOCALL, Miss Chang will file for an emergency injunction to prevent anyone, including the Harringtons, from accessing the property until ownership is legally established." "And Sierra and Luna?" Charlotte asked, concern evident in her voice. "Will remain under protective custody until we've neutralized any threat from the Harringtons," Davis assured them. James Harrington's actions today crossed a line from civil dispute into criminal intimidation. "We'll be paying him a visit very shortly." While the legal machinery began turning, Sierra found herself in a quiet corner of the sheriff's office, Luna sleeping against her shoulder, Max at their feet. The events of the past 48 hours seemed surreal. The inheritance of a supposedly worthless mine, the discovery of a fortune in gemstones, the uncovering of decades-old fraud, and possibly worse. Chang joined her, offering a cup of steaming coffee. "The judge granted the emergency injunction," she reported. The mine is legally sealed from all entry except law enforcement until the ownership case is resolved. And with the evidence we have, that resolution strongly favors you." Sierra nodded gratefully. "What about Vincent Harrington's remains?" "The forensic team is preparing to excavate the site tomorrow. If the remains are positively identified as Vincent's." Chang paused. "Well, that opens questions about how he died and who knew about it. The fact that Eleanor Harrington has been so desperate to acquire the property suggests she might have suspicions about her husband's fate." A deputy approached them, phone in hand. "Ms. Blackwood? There's a call for you. A Ms. Eleanor Harrington insists on speaking with you directly." Sierra exchanged glances with Chang, who nodded. "Put it on speaker," Sierra instructed, wanting witnesses to whatever the Harrington matriarch had to say. "Luna, out," Sierra ordered immediately, pulling her daughter back from the opening. "Go back to the main chamber." "But Mom," "Now Luna." Once Luna was safely away, Sierra examined the area Max had uncovered more carefully. The bone appeared old, likely there for decades. And it wasn't alone. As she cleared more debris, she found additional skeletal remains, a complete human skeleton, partially buried under rock fall, with tattered remnants of clothing still clinging to the bones. Beside the skeleton lay an old-fashioned miner's helmet and a leather wallet. With trembling fingers, Sierra opened the wallet and found an ID card so old its plastic was yellowing. Vincent Harrington, William's grandfather. The pieces suddenly connected in Sierra's mind. According to Ezekiel's journals, Vincent had been his partner before the survey fraud. This hidden chamber must have been their original discovery, kept secret from others until the partnership dissolved. Had Vincent returned later, perhaps to steal more specimens? Had there been a confrontation, a cave-in? Whatever had happened here decades ago, it explained why Eleanor Harrington, Vincent's widow, was so determined to acquire the property. She wasn't just protecting her family from fraud allegations, she was hiding a much darker secret. Sierra carefully gathered the most crucial items: the legal documents, the surveyor's confession, the bearer bonds, and Ezekiel's letter. The human remains would need to be reported to authorities, but first, she needed to secure her family's claim and safety. As they made their way back through the tunnel toward the waterfall entrance, Sierra's mind raced with possibilities. The evidence she carried could destroy the Harrington family's reputation and fortune. The legal battle would be brutal, but with Ezekiel's meticulous documentation and the former surveyor's confession, they stood a real chance of winning. More immediately concerning, however, was the threat the Harringtons posed. If they discovered that Sierra knew about Vincent's remains, there was no telling what they might do to protect their family secret. They emerged from behind the waterfall to find the afternoon sun lowering toward the mountains. They needed to reach Charlotte's cabin before dark, avoiding the main trails where the Harringtons might be searching for them. "We're going to take a different way back," Sierra told Luna as they dried themselves as best they could in the late afternoon sunshine. "And we're not going back to our cabin tonight." Luna nodded, understanding the gravity of their situation despite her young age. "Because of the bad people at our house?" "Yes," Sierra confirmed, seeing no point in shielding her daughter from the truth. "We need to get these papers to Ms. Chung and tell the sheriff what we found." With Max once again taking the lead, they set off along a deer trail that Sierra hoped would eventually connect with the road near Charlotte's property. The border collie seemed to understand their need for stealth, moving silently through the underbrush and occasionally stopping to listen, ears alert for any sign of pursuit. As they hiked, Sierra couldn't help but reflect on the strange turns her life had taken. 3 months ago, she had been destitute, living in her truck, wondering how she would feed her daughter the next week. Now she carried evidence of a fortune in gemstones that rightfully belonged to her family, along with proof of decades of fraud by one of the region's most powerful families. More than that, she had discovered a legacy of strength and perseverance through her, Grandfather, a man she had never met, but who had planned for her arrival, preparing the way for her to reclaim what had been stolen from their family. The path ahead would not be easy. The Harringtons would fight with every resource at their disposal. But for the first time since William's death had sent her life spiraling into poverty and desperation, Sierra felt equal to the challenge ahead. She wasn't just fighting for wealth or even justice in the abstract. She was fighting for her daughter's future, for her family's legacy, and for every person the Harringtons had ever bullied, cheated, or threatened into submission. As the distant figures of the Harrington search party appeared on the ridge behind them, Sierra, Luna, and Max slipped into the deepening shadows of the forest, carrying the truth that would change everything. The forest grew dense as Sierra led Luna and Max away from the waterfall, navigating through underbrush and over fallen logs. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows through the trees, making their trek increasingly treacherous. "Mom, are they still following us?" Luna whispered, clutching her backpack straps tightly. Sierra glanced back toward the ridge where they'd last spotted the Harrington search party. "I don't see them, but we need to keep moving." Max suddenly froze, ears perked forward. A low growl rumbled in his throat. "What is it, boy?" Sierra asked, instinctively pulling Luna closer. The answer came in the form of voices echoing through the trees, men calling to each other, branches snapping underfoot. The Harringtons' men were closer than she'd thought. "This way," Sierra whispered, pointing to a steep ravine to their left. It wasn't the direction they wanted to go, but it offered cover. They scrambled down the embankment, using roots and saplings to control their descent. At the bottom, a small creek flowed through a narrow passage, its banks thick with underbrush. "We'll follow the water," Sierra decided. "It'll hide our tracks and lead us to the main river eventually." Luna nodded bravely, though exhaustion was evident in her face. They had been hiking for hours with minimal food and water, and the emotional strain was taking its toll. Max padded alongside Luna protectively, occasionally looking back up the ravine with alert vigilance. As they waded through the shallow creek, Sierra's mind raced. The evidence she carried in her backpack was explosive proof of not only the Harringtons' fraud but potentially their involvement in a decades-old death, whether accidental or otherwise. She needed to get it to Meredith Chang and the authorities, but first they had to find safety for the night. The creek eventually widened into a proper stream, and as twilight deepened into dusk, Sierra spotted a flicker of light through the trees ahead. Her first instinct was caution. It could be the Harringtons, but as they drew closer, she recognized the outline of Charlotte's cabin, perched on the edge of a small clearing. "We made it," Sierra breathed, relief washing over her. "That's Charlotte's place." They approached cautiously, Max taking the lead to ensure no danger awaited. The cabin appeared quiet, with only a single lamp illuminating the interior. Sierra knocked softly on the back door, ready to flee if necessary. The door swung open to reveal Charlotte, shotgun in hand, which she immediately lowered upon recognizing them. "Thank goodness," she said, ushering them inside and quickly locking the door behind them. "I was worried when I found your note. The Harringtons have been combing the mountain all afternoon." Sierra collapsed into a chair, the adrenaline that had kept her going finally ebbing away. "We found it, Charlotte. The gemstone cache. And much more." While Luna and Max devoured the simple meal Charlotte provided, Sierra explained everything: the hidden chamber behind the waterfall, Ezekiel's secret mining operation, the evidence of the Harringtons' fraud, and the grim discovery of Vincent Harrington's remains. Charlotte listened without interruption, her weathered face revealing nothing until Sierra finished. "I suspected as much," she finally said. "Not about Vincent, that's a shock, but about the gemstones. Ezekiel hinted at a major discovery years ago, but he was paranoid about the Harringtons finding out. Said he was building a case, gathering evidence before he went public." "He was," Sierra confirmed, spreading out the documents she'd taken from the hidden chamber. "And he left it all to me. The question is, what do I do now?" Charlotte studied the papers with professional interest. "These survey documents are damning. The notarized confession even more so. As for Vincent's remains," she frowned, "that complicates things. We need to inform the sheriff, but given the Harringtons' influence, we need to be careful about how we proceed." "Miss Chang," Sierra decided. Ezekiel trusted her. "We'll call her first thing in the morning, have her meet us at the sheriff's office with these documents." Charlotte nodded approval. Smart, safety in numbers and official channels. The Harringtons can't disappear an entire group of witnesses at the sheriff's office. A soft snore drew their attention to the small sofa where Luna had fallen asleep, Max curled protectively at her feet. The sight reminded Sierra of what was truly at stake, not just millions in gemstones or justice for past wrongs, but a secure future for her daughter. "Get some rest," Charlotte advised. "I'll keep watch tonight. My rifle tends to discourage uninvited visitors." Morning arrived with a tentative knock at Charlotte's door. Both women tensed, but a familiar voice called out, "Charlotte? It's Meredith Chang. Are you there?" Sierra's relief was palpable as Charlotte admitted the attorney. Chang looked disheveled, as if she'd driven through the night. "I got your message," she said to Charlotte. "What's this about Sierra Blackwood being in danger?" Sierra stepped forward. "It's a long story, but the short version is that I found what my grandfather was hiding at Crystal Ridge Mine, and the Harringtons are willing to do almost anything to keep it secret." Over strong coffee, Sierra recounted the previous day's discoveries, while Chang examined the documents with growing astonishment. Eleanor's voice crackled through the phone, surprisingly subdued. "Miss Blackwood, it seems we find ourselves at an impasse." "There's no impasse, Mrs. Harrington," Sierra replied evenly. "The evidence is clear. Your family altered survey maps to steal mineral rights that belonged to my grandfather. And tomorrow, the forensic team will recover remains that may be your husband's from a chamber your family has been desperate to keep hidden." A long silence followed. "You don't understand what you've stumbled into," Eleanor finally said, her voice betraying age and weariness that had been absent in person. "This isn't just about gemstones or property lines." "Then explain it to me," Sierra challenged. Another pause. "Not over the phone. Meet me, alone, at the Crystal Ridge cabin at sunset. I'll tell you what really happened 50 years ago, and why your mother left Montana and never returned." The line went dead before Sierra could respond. "It's a trap," Charlotte declared flatly when Sierra relayed the conversation. "Eleanor's desperate. The evidence is mounting against her family, and she's looking for any advantage." Sheriff Davis agreed. "Under no circumstances should you meet her alone." But Sierra wasn't so certain. "She mentioned my mother, why she left and never came back. That's something I've wondered about my whole life." "She's manipulating you," Chang warned, "using your personal history as bait." Sierra knew they were probably right, yet something in Eleanor's tone had seemed genuine, the weariness of someone carrying a burden for too long. "What if we controlled the meeting?" she suggested. "Not at the cabin, but here, at the sheriff's office. With all of you present, but observing from another room. Give Eleanor the illusion of a private conversation while ensuring my safety." Davis considered this. It could work. We might learn valuable information about the case and about Vincent Harrington's death, if that's what this is about. After some debate, they agreed on the plan. Chang would call Eleanor back with the counteroffer, a meeting at the sheriff's office at 7 p.m., with assurances of privacy but non-negotiable security protocols. To everyone's surprise, Eleanor agreed immediately. "She's desperate," Charlotte reiterated, "which makes her dangerous even in a controlled environment." As they prepared for the meeting, Luna approached her mother with a solemnity beyond her years. "Mom, I made something for you." She handed Sierra a small object wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was a polished blue stone, the sapphire fragment they'd found in Ezekiel's wooden box, now crudely but lovingly shaped into a smooth oval by Luna using tools from the sheriff's office break room. "Deputy Richards helped me," Luna explained. "It's for luck. Grandpa Ezekiel kept it safe for us all these years. Now it can keep you safe when you talk to the scary lady." Sierra clutched the stone, moved beyond words by her daughter's gesture. In that moment, she felt the full weight and blessing of her inheritance, not just the material wealth of the gemstones, but the resilience, creativity, and love that had flowed through generations of her family, culminating in this remarkable child. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered, slipping the stone into her pocket. "With this, I know I'll find the truth." As the hour of the meeting approached, Sierra found herself in a small interview room, the polished sapphire a reassuring weight in her pocket, ready to confront Eleanor Harrington and finally uncover the full story of Crystal Ridge Mine and perhaps, at last, understand why her mother had fled Montana all those years ago, never to return. Eleanor Harrington arrived at the sheriff's office precisely at 7 p.m., a study in dignified composure despite the circumstances. Though she moved with the slight stiffness of age, her bearing remained regal, her silver hair impeccably styled, her clothes expensive but understated. Only the slight tremor in her hands as she placed her designer handbag on the table betrayed any inner turmoil. "Miss Blackwood," she nodded, taking the seat opposite Sierra. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Sheriff Davis had explained the setup one-way glass through which Luna, Chang, Charlotte, and the sheriff herself would observe. Recording equipment capturing every word. And a panic button beneath the table should Sierra feel threatened in any way. "You said you wanted to explain what happened 50 years ago," Sierra began, fingering the polished sapphire in her pocket. "And why my mother left Montana and never returned." Eleanor's gaze was steady, assessing. "First, I need to know exactly what you found in the mine. Not just the gemstones, I've known about those for decades. But what else? What evidence?" Sierra considered her response carefully. "Documents proving survey fraud committed by your late husband. A notarized confession from the county surveyor admitting he falsified boundaries at Vincent's request. Ezekiel's detailed records of the true extent of the gemstone deposit." She paused before adding, "And human remains in a hidden chamber, wearing identification belonging to Vincent Harrington." Something flickered in Eleanor's eyes, not surprise, Sierra noted, but a complex emotion that might have been relief mixed with resignation. "So you know the worst of it," Eleanor said quietly. "Or at least you think you do." She straightened, seeming to come to a decision. "Let me tell you a story about 4 young people in the summer of 1972. Your grandfather Ezekiel Blackwood, my husband Vincent Harrington, your grandmother Rose Miller, and me." Sierra leaned forward, startled. "My grandmother? She died when my mother was a child. I never even saw a photograph of her." "Because your mother destroyed them all," Eleanor said. "For reasons that will become clear." She began her tale, her voice taking on a distant quality, as if looking back through the decades to a different world. "We were all in our 20s. Vincent and I were newly married, part of Denver's elite, spending summers at the Harrington family's Montana lodge. Ezekiel was a local prospector with a reputation for finding promising claims. Rose was a geology student working on her doctorate, brilliant and beautiful. Eleanor's fingers traced patterns on the table as she spoke. Vincent hired Ezekiel to explore mineral possibilities on Harrington land. That's when they met Rose, who was conducting research in the area. The 4 of us became close." The hesitation in her voice suggested layers of complexity in that simple word. Rose identified unusual geological formations suggesting gemstone deposits. Vincent provided funding, Ezekiel provided expertise. And together they began exploring what would become Crystal Ridge Mine. What they found exceeded everyone's expectations, a major gemstone deposit potentially worth millions. Sierra could see where this was leading, and Vincent decided to steal it. Eleanor's expression hardened. It wasn't that simple. The initial discovery was genuinely on Harrington land. The question was how far the deposit extended. When surveys suggested the richest veins were actually on Ezekiel's neighboring claim, Vincent made adjustments. He committed fraud, Sierra said bluntly. Yes, Eleanor didn't flinch from the accusation. He bribed officials, altered surveys, ensured the official records showed the primary deposit on Harrington property. Ezekiel suspected, but couldn't prove anything until Rose found evidence of the altered surveys. Eleanor's gaze grew distant. That's when everything fell apart. Rose confronted Vincent, threatened to expose him. They argued violently. I wasn't there that night, but Vincent returned to our lodge disheveled, distraught. He claimed Rose had fallen during their argument, hit her head on mining equipment. He said it was an accident. Sierra felt cold shock wash over her. Are you saying Vincent killed my grandmother? He claimed it was accidental, Eleanor repeated, though her tone suggested she'd harbored her own doubts. Vincent was terrified. His family's reputation, our future, everything was at stake. He and I went to the mine that night to handle the situation. But when we arrived, Ezekiel was already there. He'd found Rose. Eleanor's voice grew thick with emotion. The rage in his eyes, I'll never forget it. He attacked Vincent, and in the struggle, they both fell into a newly excavated shaft. I called out, but there was no response from either man. Sierra struggled to process this revelation. You're saying both Vincent and Ezekiel fell? But Ezekiel survived. He lived until just recently. Eleanor nodded. I fled in panic, convinced both men were dead. I reported Vincent missing, claimed he'd gone hiking alone. Search parties found nothing. 2 weeks later, as I was preparing to return to Denver a widow, Ezekiel appeared at our lodge, injured, but very much alive. Her hands trembled more visibly now. He told me Vincent was dead, that he would keep my secret, that I had helped cover up Rose's death if I agreed to his terms. The Crystal Ridge claim would remain his, undisputed. The Harringtons would never attempt to mine gems from their neighboring property. And Margaret, his infant daughter with Rose, would be raised without ever knowing the truth about her mother's death. Sierra felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her. My mother was their daughter? Rose and Ezekiel's? Yes, barely a year old when it all happened. Eleanor's eyes met Sierra's. Ezekiel kept his part of the bargain. He raised Margaret alone, never telling her what really happened to her mother. The official story was that Rose died of illness. He never tried to expose Vincent's fraud or my complicity. In return, I ensured the Harringtons left Crystal Ridge alone. Until recently, Sierra noted. Eleanor sighed deeply. I kept my word for decades. But when James and others in the family discovered historical geological surveys suggesting a massive gemstone deposit on what they thought was Harrington land, they began pushing to reclaim it. I couldn't tell them why we had to stay away without revealing everything. And then Ezekiel died, leaving the property to you, Margaret's daughter. You were afraid we'd discover the truth, Sierra said. Not just about the fraud, but about my grandmother's death and Vincent's fate. I was afraid of the pain it would cause, Eleanor corrected. Margaret left Montana at 18, severing all ties with Ezekiel. Do you know why? Sierra shook her head. Because she found letters Rose had written to Ezekiel before her death, letters that made it clear they were in love despite Rose being married to Vincent. Margaret couldn't reconcile the father she knew with the man who had, in her mind, destroyed her mother's marriage. She never knew the full truth, never knew her mother had planned to leave Vincent for Ezekiel. The revelation hit Sierra like a physical blow. Her mother had fled Montana, believing her father had been the villain, never knowing he had been protecting her from a far darker truth. "Why are you telling me this now?" Sierra asked. "After all these years of secrecy?" Eleanor's composed facade finally cracked, revealing the exhaustion of a woman who had carried a terrible burden for half a century. "Because it's over. The remains you found are Vincent's. The evidence of fraud is irrefutable. And I'm too old and tired to keep fighting." She reached into her handbag and withdrew a sealed envelope. "This is my formal statement confessing to conspiracy to conceal Rose Miller's death and Vincent Harrington's death. I've also included documentation of the original survey fraud and subsequent cover-up." Sierra stared at the envelope in disbelief. "You're willing to destroy your family's reputation? To potentially face criminal charges?" "I'm dying, Ms. Blackwood. Cancer, 6 months at most." Eleanor stated this without self-pity. "I've lived with this guilt for 50 years. I want to leave this world with at least some measure of peace." The door opened, and Sheriff Davis entered, having heard enough. "Mrs. Harrington, I need to inform you that you have the right to remain silent." "Anything you say." "I'm well aware of my rights, Sheriff," Eleanor interrupted calmly. "And I've already consulted my attorney. I'm prepared to make a full statement." As Davis continued the formal process, Sierra sat stunned, trying to absorb the implications of Eleanor's revelations. Her mother had never known the truth about her own parents. Sierra herself was the granddaughter of not just Ezekiel Blackwood, but Rose Miller, a brilliant geologist whose life had been cut tragically short. The gemstone deposit that had seemed like a fortunate inheritance now carried the weight of 3 deaths and decades of secrets. How could she view it as anything but tainted? Hours later, after Eleanor had been formally processed and released on her own recognizance due to her terminal condition, Sierra sat in the sheriff's office break room with Luna asleep on a cot nearby. Chang was working with Davis to coordinate the formal investigation, while Charlotte had gone to feed Max and check on both cabins. "Mom?" Luna's sleepy voice broke through Sierra's troubled thoughts. "Hey, sweetheart. I thought you were asleep." Luna sat up, rubbing her eyes. "I was pretending. I heard everything the old lady said." Sierra moved to sit beside her daughter, concerned about how much Luna had understood and how it might have affected her. "Are you okay? That was a lot of grown-up stuff." Luna considered this with surprising thoughtfulness. "It's sad about Great-Grandma Rose and Great-Grandpa Ezekiel, and about Grandma Margaret not knowing the truth. But you know what I think?" "What's that?" "I think Great-Grandpa Ezekiel wanted us to find the gems and the truth. That's why he left everything to you. He trusted you to make things right." The simple wisdom in Luna's words struck Sierra deeply. Ezekiel hadn't just left her a valuable property. He'd entrusted her with his life's work and with the truth he'd protected for so long. "You might be right," Sierra acknowledged. "But what do we do with it all? The mine, the gems, the truth?" Luna's answer came without hesitation. "We honor them. Great-Grandma Rose found the gems because she was smart and brave. Great-Grandpa Ezekiel protected them for us. We should make them proud." Before Sierra could respond, Chang entered the break room, looking tired but satisfied. "The forensic team has confirmed the remains are Vincent Harrington's," she reported. "And Eleanor's statement matches the evidence we've found so far. The DIA is reviewing the case, but given the age of the crimes and Eleanor's terminal condition, they're likely to focus on resolving the property dispute rather than pursuing charges." "And the Harringtons?" Sierra asked. "James and the others are furious with Eleanor, of course. But with her confession and the evidence we've gathered, their claim to the gemstone rights is effectively dead. The property and everything in it belongs unquestionably to you, Sierra." The confirmation should have felt like victory, but Sierra found herself overwhelmed by the weight of it all. What am I supposed to do with a gemstone deposit worth hundreds of millions and a family history full of tragedy? Chang's expression softened. That's entirely up to you. But if you'll permit a suggestion from someone who knew Ezekiel in his final years. Sierra nodded, eager for guidance. Ezekiel once told me his greatest regret was that Rose never got to complete her work mapping and studying the unusual gemstone formations at Crystal Ridge. He said she had theories about their formation that could have changed geological understanding. He kept all her research notes, her unfinished dissertation. Maybe honoring her work would be a way to bring something positive from all this. The idea resonated with something deep in Sierra's heart, a connection to the grandmother she'd never known, the brilliant woman whose life had been cut short, but whose legacy might still be fulfilled. 3 months later, Sierra stood on the newly constructed observation platform overlooking the entrance to Crystal Ridge Mine. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a dilapidated, abandoned site was now a hive of carefully controlled activity. Geologists and gemologists worked alongside mining engineers, documenting and extracting specimens with scientific precision rather than purely commercial goals. The cabin had been renovated and expanded to serve as both a comfortable home for Sierra and Luna and a field office for the Rose Miller Foundation for Geological Research, Sierra's tribute to her grandmother, funded by the strategic sale of a small portion of the gemstone deposit. The university team is ready for the tour, Charlotte announced, approaching with a clipboard. As the Foundation's field director, she coordinated between the commercial mining operation, which provided ongoing funding, and the research initiatives, which fulfilled the Foundation's educational mission. Thanks. Is Luna finished with her presentation? Charlotte smiled. She's been rehearsing all morning. Pretty impressive for a 10-year-old to be lecturing graduate students about crystal formations. Sierra laughed. She's in her element. Between you and Professor Kingsley from the university, she's getting an education I could never have provided on my own. They made their way to the newly constructed educational center, where Luna stood confidently before a group of geology students, pointing to a sophisticated display of gemstone samples. The unusual concentration of diverse gemstone types in a single deposit is what makes Crystal Ridge unique, Luna was explaining with the seriousness of a seasoned academic. My great-grandmother's theory was that specific mineral-rich, hydrothermal conditions created perfect circumstances for various crystal formations simultaneously. Pride swelled in Sierra's chest as she watched her daughter. Luna had blossomed in these past months, her natural curiosity and intelligence nurtured by the remarkable community that had formed around the Rose Miller Foundation. The girl who had once huddled in the back of a pickup truck, her only possession a journal of mineral sketches, was now thriving, respected by professional scientists, happily making friends with the children of staff members, and developing a deep connection to her family's legacy. As Luna concluded her presentation to enthusiastic applause, Sierra's phone buzzed with a text from Chang. Eleanor passed last night. Peacefully, according to her nurse. Funeral private. Family only. The news brought a complex wave of emotions. Eleanor Harrington had been both villain and victim in their story. A woman who had made terrible choices in her youth, but had ultimately chosen truth and accountability in her final days. Her confession had not only secured Sierra's claim to Crystal Ridge, but had revealed the true story of Rose and Ezekiel's relationship, allowing Sierra to understand her family history in its full complexity. "Mom," Luna called, running over after her presentation. "Professor Kingsley says my theory about the Eastern Chambers formation might actually be correct. She wants me to help with the core samples tomorrow." "That's wonderful," Sierra smiled, tucking away thoughts of Eleanor to focus on her daughter's excitement. "Just remember to wear your safety gear this time." Luna rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Max already reminded me. He won't let me in the tunnels without my helmet." As if summoned by his name, the border collie trotted up. now sporting an official safety vest with Crystal Ridge security emblazoned on the side a touch. Luna had insisted on when they formalized the staff structure. That evening, as they sat on the cabin's expanded porch watching sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson, Sierra reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 4 months. From desperate poverty to managing a multi-million-dollar foundation, from a woman with no knowledge of her roots to someone deeply connected to a complex family legacy spanning generations. "Do you think Great-Grandma Rose would be proud of us?" Luna asked, seeming to read her mother's thoughts as she often did. Sierra looked out over Crystal Ridge Mine, no longer a symbol of tragedy and secrets, but a place of discovery, education, and opportunity for dozens of people who now work there. "I think she would be," Sierra said softly. "We're continuing her work, honoring her passion for understanding the Earth's mysteries. And we've brought truth to a story that was buried for too long." "And Great-Grandpa Ezekiel?" Sierra smiled, remembering the stern face in the portrait that still hung above the fireplace inside. "I think he knew exactly what he was doing when he left this place to us. He couldn't tell the truth while he was alive. He'd made a promise to protect your grandmother from painful knowledge. But he made sure the truth would come out after he was gone, and he made sure we'd have the resources to build something meaningful from it all." Luna leaned against her mother's side, Max settling at their feet with a contented sigh. "I'm glad we didn't sell the mine to those mean Harringtons." "So am I," Sierra agreed, thinking of James Harrington, who had eventually dropped all legal challenges and retreated to Denver in disgrace after Eleanor's confession became public. "But you know what I'm most grateful for?" "What?" "That even in our darkest moment, when we had nothing but a truck in each other, you never stopped believing in possibility. Your journal full of minerals, your excitement about the mine when we first arrived, you saw treasure where others saw worthless rock." Luna grinned. "Just like Great-Grandpa Ezekiel. Charlotte says I have his eyes." "And Great-Grandma Rose's scientific mind," Sierra added. "The best of both of them lives in you." As darkness fell and stars appeared above Crystal Ridge, Sierra thought about the brass key that had unlocked not just a hidden chamber of gemstones, but the truth of her family's past. That key now hung framed in the educational center alongside Rose's unfinished dissertation and Ezekiel's journal artifacts, of a complex legacy that Sierra and Luna were reshaping into something healing and hopeful. The worthless mining claim had indeed concealed treasure beyond price, not just in gemstones, but in truth, connection, purpose, and most precious of all, the opportunity to transform a legacy of loss into one of discovery and growth. With each passing day, as researchers made new findings and local families found employment through the foundation, the dark history of Crystal Ridge receded further, overshadowed by the bright future unfolding there. Sierra touched the polished sapphire she now wore as a pendant Luna's gift, her talisman of courage through the darkest moments of their journey. Like that rough stone transformed by loving hands into something beautiful, the painful past had been reshaped into a foundation for an unexpected future full of purpose and possibility. The mountain that had once seemed to offer nothing but a worthless claim had given them everything that truly mattered, including the strength to rebuild not just their lives but their sense of who they were and where they had come from. And in that knowledge lay a wealth beyond measure. 5 years had transformed Crystal Ridge beyond recognition. The once abandoned mining claim had blossomed into the most innovative gemological research center in North America, drawing scientists, students, and tourists from around the world. What had begun as Sierra's tribute to her grandmother had evolved into something far greater, a model for ethical mining practices, scientific discovery, and community development. Sierra stood at the edge of the newly completed observation deck, watching the sunrise paint the mountain in shades of amber and rose. These quiet moments before the day began in earnest had become her ritual, a time to reflect on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. Morning, boss. Charlotte approached with 2 steaming mugs, her once weathered face now more relaxed, though she retained the no-nonsense demeanor that had made her invaluable as the Foundation's operations director. Thought you could use this before the chaos starts. Thanks. Sierra accepted the coffee gratefully. Is everything ready for the dedication ceremony? Charlotte nodded. The Rose Miller Research Center is prepped and perfect. The governor's team did their final security sweep last night. Press starts arriving at 9. The research center represented the culmination of Sierra's vision, a state-of-the-art facility built into the mountainside, designed to honor the natural landscape while providing cutting-edge laboratories for studying the unique gemstone formations of Crystal Ridge. Today's dedication would officially open the facility to the international scientific community. And Luna? Sierra asked, though she already knew the answer. Charlotte's expression softened. In the lab since 5 a.m., perfecting her presentation. That girl's determination would put most PhDs to shame. At 15, Luna Blackwood had grown into a remarkable young woman, brilliant, confident, and passionate about continuing her great-grandmother's research. Her work on crystalline formations had already been published in several scientific journals, an unprecedented achievement for someone her age. She gets that from both sides of her family, Sierra mused. Ezekiel's stubbornness and Rose's scientific brilliance. And her mother's courage, Charlotte added with uncharacteristic sentimentality. Don't sell yourself short, Sierra. None of this would exist without you. Before Sierra could respond, Max, now gray-muzzled but still spry, came bounding up the path from the main complex. Followed by Meredith Chang, the attorney had become a close friend and valued advisor, helping Sierra navigate the complex legal and financial challenges of building the foundation. The documentary crew is here early, Chang reported. They want to get some sunrise footage of the mine entrance. And the Gemological Institute representatives have arrived with the certification for the Blackwood Sapphire. Sierra smiled at the mention of the Foundation's crown jewel, a 341-carat, loose sapphire discovered in the Eastern Chamber 3 years ago. Rather than selling it to a private collector, Sierra had chosen to donate it to the Smithsonian, with the stipulation that it be named after Luna as the discoverer. Today, representatives would present the official certification before the sapphire began its journey to Washington. I should check on Luna, Sierra decided. She's been nervous about her speech. The research center hummed with pre-event activity as Sierra made her way through its gleaming corridors. Scientists and staff nodded respectfully as she passed, many stopping to offer congratulations on the day's milestone. 5 years ago, she had been homeless, desperate, at rock bottom. Now she led an organization employing over 100 people, from world-class researchers to local staff who had found new opportunities in their struggling mountain community. She found Luna in the central laboratory, bent over a high-powered microscope, her long dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Around her, sophisticated equipment analyzed gemstone samples, mapping their molecular structures and formation patterns. How's it going, scientist? Sierra asked softly. Luna looked up, her face lighting with a smile that still had the power to melt Sierra's heart. Though adolescence had brought changes, Luna was taller now, more serious. Her features maturing into a striking blend of the Blackwood and Miller lineages. Her eyes still held that same wonder that had kept them going through their darkest days. I think I've found something, Mom, Luna said, excitement bubbling through her composed exterior. Look at this inclusion pattern. It matches Great-Grandma Rose's notes about hydrotheoretical formation, but with a variation I don't think anyone has documented before. Sierra peered through the microscope at the tiny crystal structures Luna had been examining. Though she had developed considerable knowledge over the years, the scientific details still sometimes eluded her. Is that significant? It could be revolutionary, Luna explained, her passion palpable. If I'm right, It changes our understanding of how certain gemstones form under specific pressure conditions. It might even explain why Crystal Ridge has such diverse gem types in a single deposit. Sierra squeezed her daughter's shoulder. Your great-grandmother would be so proud of you continuing her work, making discoveries she never had the chance to complete. I wish I could have known her, Luna said softly. In many ways you do, Sierra replied. Through her research notes, through the mystery she identified that you're now solving. And I see her in you every day, that same determination to uncover truth, no matter how deeply buried. Luna's expression grew thoughtful. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Max hadn't found that hidden chamber? If we'd just sold the claim to the Harringtons like they wanted? Sierra considered the question seriously. I think about it sometimes. We'd probably be living in some small apartment in Denver, scraping by. You might not have had the chance to develop your scientific talents. But most importantly, the truth about Rose and Ezekiel would have remained buried forever. And the Harringtons would have gotten away with everything, Luna added, a flash of the old anger momentarily visible. Sierra shook her head. That's not the part that matters most. What matters is that because we persevered, because we didn't give up even when everything seemed hopeless, we discovered not just gemstones, but our heritage, who we are, and where we come from. She smiled at her daughter. And in the process, we created something that helps others discover their potential too. The Crystal Ridge Scholarship Program had become one of the Foundation's proudest achievements, providing educational opportunities for disadvantaged students throughout Montana, with particular focus on Native American communities whose ancestral lands included the mountain range. Many of those students now worked at the research center, bringing diverse perspectives to the scientific endeavor. You should get ready for your speech, Sierra suggested. The governor will be here in 2 hours. Luna nodded, suddenly looking nervous. Do you think I'm ready? To speak in front of all those important people? More than ready, Sierra assured her. Just speak from your heart about the work, the way you do when it's just us. That passion is what people need to hear. As Luna went to prepare, Sierra took a moment to wander through the research center that had become the heart of their work. The main hall featured exhibits chronicling Crystal Ridge's remarkable history, from Rose's original geological surveys to Ezekiel's decades of solitary mining, to the modern scientific discovery taking place now. One wall was dedicated to the Crystal Ridge story, telling the full truth of what had happened 50 years ago. Sierra had insisted on transparency from the beginning, believing that acknowledging the painful past was essential to building something meaningful for the future. A photograph of Eleanor Harrington hung in this section, not as villain, but as part of the complex human story. Her deathbed confession had made the Foundation's work possible, and Sierra had chosen to honor that final act of courage alongside the remembrances of Rose and Ezekiel. The Harrington family had initially fought against this public telling, but over time, even they had come to recognize the healing power of truth. James Harrington himself had eventually made a substantial anonymous donation to the scholarship fund, a gesture of reconciliation that Sierra had accepted with grace. By mid-morning, the research center was filled with visitors for the dedication ceremony. Government officials, scientific luminaries, media representatives, and community members gathered in the grand auditorium, a space designed with perfect acoustics and dramatic views of the mountains through floor-to-ceiling windows. As Sierra took her place at the podium, she looked out at the assembled crowd. In the front row sat Luna, poised and attentive. Beside her was Charlotte, uncharacteristically dressed in formal attire for the occasion. Chang sat nearby with her daughter, who had become Luna's close friend. And even Sheriff Davis had made the trip, now retired but still keenly interested in Crystal Ridge's development. 5 years ago, Sierra began, her voice steady despite the emotion welling within her. I stood at the entrance to what was then called a worthless mining claim with my daughter and our dog. possessing nothing but hope and determination. We had no home, no money, no security, just a mysterious inheritance from a grandfather I'd never met. The audience listened in rapt attention as Sierra recounted their journey, the discovery of the hidden gemstone chamber, the uncovering of long-buried truths, the establishment of the Rose Miller Foundation. What we found in that mountain wasn't just precious stones, she continued. We found our history, our identity, and ultimately, our purpose. Crystal Ridge taught us that sometimes what appears worthless to the world contains immeasurable value. If you have the courage to look deeper, to persevere when others would surrender. She gestured to the panoramic view of the mountains beyond the windows. Today, as we dedicate the Rose Miller Research Center, we honor not just scientific inquiry, but human resilience. My grandmother Rose never got to complete her groundbreaking work. My grandfather Ezekiel spent decades preserving her legacy in secret. Their story reminds us that some treasures take generations to fully reveal themselves. Sierra paused, looking directly at Luna. And sometimes, it takes the fresh eyes of youth to see what others have missed. I'm proud to introduce my daughter, Luna Blackwood, whose recent discoveries are continuing the scientific journey her great-grandmother began 50 years ago. Luna approached the podium with measured confidence, carrying not just her prepared remarks but the leather-bound journal she had kept since childhood, now filled with sophisticated diagrams and scientific observations instead of childish sketches, but still a symbol of her unwavering passion. As Luna began her presentation, explaining in accessible yet precise terms the significance of Crystal Ridge's unique gemstone formations, Sierra felt a profound sense of completion. The circle that had begun with Rose's initial discoveries, continued through Ezekiel's solitary vigilance, and now flourished through Luna's brilliant innovations, had come full turn. After the formal ceremony, as guests toured the new facilities, Sierra slipped away to a quiet corner of the property, a small memorial garden established in honor of Rose and Ezekiel. Here, away from the crowds and cameras, she could connect with the grandparents she'd never known but whose legacy had transformed her life. "I wish you could see it all," she whispered to the stone markers bearing their names. "The research center, Luna's work, the community we've built. Everything you dreamed about has come to fruition, though in ways you probably never imagined." "Mom," Luna's voice came softly from behind her. "Everyone's looking for you. The governor wants to discuss expanding the educational program statewide." Sierra turned to find not just Luna, but also Charlotte Chang and several other key Foundation members waiting respectfully at the garden's entrance. "The documentary crew asked me something interesting," Luna said as they walked back toward the center together. "They wanted to know what I thought was the most valuable thing we discovered at Crystal Ridge. They expected me to say the Blackwood sapphire." "What did you tell them?" Sierra asked, curious about her daughter's perspective. Luna smiled, her expression reflecting wisdom beyond her 15 years. "I told them the most valuable discovery wasn't something we found in the mountain, but something we found in ourselves. The gemstones gave us resources, but our journey gave us purpose." Charlotte snorted good-naturedly. "Getting philosophical on us, are you? Next thing you know, you'll be writing inspirational books instead of scientific papers." Luna laughed. "I'm just saying what Mom always taught me, that true wealth isn't measured in carats or dollars, but in the lives we touch and the difference we make." As they rejoined the celebration, Sierra watched Luna being surrounded by young scholarship recipients eager to discuss their research projects with her. The sight filled her with quiet joy. Her daughter had become not just a scientific prodigy, but a mentor and inspiration to others. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the center had grown quiet, Sierra and Luna stood on the cabin porch, now expanded and modernized, but still recognizably the place where their journey had begun. Max dozed at their feet, his aging frame still serving as the loyal foundation of their little family. "Do you ever miss the simplicity of before?" Luna asked unexpectedly. "Before Crystal Ridge, Before the foundation, when it was just the three of us? Sierra considered the question carefully. Sometimes, she admitted. Those days were incredibly difficult, but there was a clarity to our struggle. We knew exactly what mattered. Keeping you fed, keeping us together, finding our next meal or place to sleep. And now? Now the challenges are more complex, the responsibilities greater. But I wouldn't trade what we've built, the difference we're making. Sierra wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. What about you? Do you ever wish for a more normal teenage life? Luna leaned into her mother's embrace. Not really. I mean, sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just worry about school dances and homework instead of presenting research to Nobel laureates. She grinned. But then I remember that most teens don't get to name sapphires at the Smithsonian or discover new geological principles. Their laughter mingled in the cool evening air, rising toward the stars that sparkled with particular brilliance over Crystal Ridge, as if the mountain itself celebrated their journey from desperation to abundance. You know what I'm most grateful for? Sierra said softly. What? That even at our lowest moment, with nothing but that final $97 in my pocket and a dubious inheritance from a grandfather I'd never met, you never lost your sense of wonder. You saw possibilities where I saw problems. You found treasure in what everyone else called worthless. Luna's eyes shimmered with emotion in the gathering darkness. We found it together, Mom. You taught me to be brave enough to look deeper, to stand firm when others tried to take what was ours. Everything we've built here, it's because you refused to give up, even when it seemed impossible. In that moment, Sierra understood with perfect clarity what Ezekiel had known all along, that the true wealth of Crystal Ridge wasn't measured in gemstones, however valuable, but in the resilience of those who called it home. Through generations, the mountain had witnessed struggle and loss, deception and grief, but also discovery, perseverance, and ultimately, transformation. The worthless mining claim had revealed treasures far beyond the glittering gems hidden in its depths. It had uncovered the strength of a family legacy passed down through generations, the power of truth to heal old wounds, and the remarkable capacity of determined hearts to build something meaningful from the ruins of broken dreams. As mother and daughter stood together beneath the vast Montana sky, the mountain that had once sheltered desperate refugees now stood as a beacon of possibility, proof that sometimes the greatest treasures lie hidden in what others discard as worthless, waiting for those with the courage and vision to uncover their true value. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.